Alrighty, and we're on. We've got a bit of a three-way going today. So we have Jacinta, the Juggernaut Austin.
Not my first rodeo.
and we've got Alex Carioti of Carioti MMA in Hornsby. So we're sitting up here upstairs at the Carioti gym. So I guess, let's start with what's coming up for you, because I think that's probably the most pressing thing. You've actually got a fight coming up.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Bring that a bit closer to your mouth.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're leaving next week.
Mm-hmm.
We're flying to Abu Dhabi, and we're fighting on UAE Warriors.
Yep.
I can't remember what number it is. On the 25th of February.
On 25th February.
Yep.
So it's a pretty busy time for Aussies fighting at the present moment. Obviously we've got the UFC, and probably by the time I get this up, it'll be early next week. But, we'll have the UFC, we have Eternal, we've got Hex Fight Series coming up, you're on UAE. There's all sorts of things happening, which is pretty exciting, I think, for the level, and it shows the level that we have been achieving here in Australia in terms of mixed martial arts. Can we talk a little bit about, how you started in martial arts? And I guess, what's gotten you to this point? Like, what age did you actually start martial arts?
Pretty late, actually. I think it was about 19 when I first went into a martial arts gym, which was out in Penrith Way.
Bring that up, yep.
Out in Penrith Way?
Yep.
Better?
Yep, that's better. Yeah, you got to really, like, these mics, if you don't talk into them, they cut out.
So yeah, hold on to it.
Yeah, even prop the shield up on your leg a little bit and then sit it up there. Yeah, just project a bit. You'll be right. You got a really long cord there, so you'll be right.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were 19, you started in Penrith.
Yeah, out in Penrith, that's where I lived. So,
Okay.
I was training back then it was actually called No Contest, which doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
And then we merged with another gym called Ultimate Training Centre, which does still exist.
Yep.
And I had my first fight out of Ultimate Training Centre.
Yeah. That's UTC in St Mary's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Another one. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is I trained for about 9 months before I had a fight. And I just fought at like the local St Mary's Band Club.
Yep.
Little kickboxing fight, 3 1.5 minute rounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how was that first experience for you? How'd you find it?
I actually wasn't very scared because I didn't know what to expect. Like, I didn't know how scary it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a bit like sparring.
Yeah.
And I thought I was really fit and really, really good to go. And then by the time I actually fought the first round, I was pretty fried. Like, it was pretty cooked.
Yeah, most people gas out, right? Like,
yeah, and all the lights and the people, it like takes a toll on you as well.
Yeah.
So it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And ever since the first one, I was more scared for the ones that followed that.
Yeah. And what was the reason why you got into martial arts?
I had a friend that was just doing it at the time.
Yep.
And at this point, I'd kind of been out of high school for a few years. Was a little bit like lost on what I wanted to do. I was super athletic in high school.
Yep.
And then when you leave high school, you sort of lose that routine. I wasn't really doing sport anymore because I was working all the time and studying. And I really just wanted to get back into something sport-wise, and a close friend was doing it. So I just went along to the gym with him.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so you tagged along and then realised, hey, I don't mind punching people in the head.
Well, actually, for the first probably like 6 weeks, I didn't join in. I just used like the cardio and weights and stuff.
Okay.
And watched, because it was all guys as well, so it was pretty like
intimidating.
Yeah. And then after a while, like eventually I'd say hello to the coach and he'd greet me every day, and then eventually he roped me into the class.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And that was the start of the journey.
It was the start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alex, how about for you? Like, what was your first foray into martial arts?
Taekwondo when I was a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, I did, I think 4 or 5 years Taekwondo. And I made an agreement with my mum that as soon as I got my black belt, I could quit.
Yep.
So I did the grading, got my black belt, and just went straight on to fencing after that.
Fencing?
Which is what I wanted to do.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on. Let's go back a step. So what age did you start the Taekwondo?
I reckon about 5 or 6, around there.
Yep.
Yeah, did that to about 10 and then started fencing at 11.
Okay, and why were you so interested in fencing?
Because my friend did it, my best mate did it. I was one of the geeky sword fighting kids. I thought it looked cool. And I ended up just getting headlong into it, like obsession level into it, and did that for the next 11 years.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so fencing is quite interesting. I quite like the movement of fencing, and there's a lot of crossover, and I think, it's one of those things that Bruce Lee used to talk about, but essentially, in fencing, because you always, lead hand forward and you're trying to get as much range as possible. And a lot of the game is actually in the parries and the setups to then counterattack off somebody's offense. Yep. Did you find that, did any of the things that you learned in Taekwondo transfer over to fencing?
Taekwondo for me was as soon as they didn't let us do contact stuff, I became disinterested as a kid. So I was complaining to my parents. I thought we were going to go there and like fight each other. When I was a kid, I got very excited.
Yep.
And when I found out it was air punching, and when we sparred, we weren't allowed to make contact. So I said to my parents, it just isn't for me. I need to do some contact, something. I just found it very boring. So I don't, even if it did cross over, I probably wasn't paying enough attention. I was just getting through it.
Yep.
With the Bruce Lee thing, actually with fencing, his brother was an epéist. And where Bruce Lee converted it was the idea of counterfighting, because the idea of Jeet Kune Do was that intercepting fist idea.
Yep.
So he took the idea of fencing of the way to be able to intercept and hit and not be hit at the same time. It's how to counter into an attack.
Yep.
And he blended that across to martial arts with especially like that idea of the way he would parry and come over the top of a shot.
Yep.
So yeah, that I studied that like a bit because I didn't know he was into it. So you get into Bruce Lee a bit.
Yep.
But yeah, his brother was an epéist, and that was how it tied back to fencing. But people have no idea how closely it relates to combat.
Yeah.
People have no idea.
Well, yeah, like it's something that I think people are starting to get a bit smarter in mixed martial arts, but there's still a lot of like meathead methodology in mixed martial arts. I think boxing is sort of been developed over so many years that, like, I think a lot of the combat athletes in boxing have been getting smarter and smarter in how they approach things. But, because mixed martial arts, there's so many variables, it was sort of like, okay, you learn a few techniques and then go and do your strength and conditioning and just blast your way through, there's really that sort of attitude for a very, very long time. But now you look at the people at the top of the spear, the tip of the spear, they're all doing a lot of study. They're all doing a lot of positional things to try and work out, okay, how do we make the most of these exchanges? And the reason why, I say that is because, I do my own fight studies and things like that. And I've been looking at the Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo fight. They fought 4 times. And this is something that I'm, going to put out on a film study. But essentially it's like, when you watch all 4 fights, you get a really good picture of like how these guys have gone away from each fight, re-strategized, re-looked at, okay, what did we go wrong? What's happened? And then when they've come back, it's like, it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was a draw. Then, Moreno won, then Figueiredo won, and then Moreno again. So it's like, it's so back and forth.
Yeah. And the Henry Cejudo effect, that he coached both of them and he impacted fights 2 and 3 very heavily with his coaching on either side.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many great things that I think, for most casual fans, they probably don't really look into it from that perspective. But anybody who's interested in martial arts in general, you need to really pay attention to some of these things because it can have a massive impact on your career as well. So okay, let's pull it back a little bit. So Jacinta, where did you grow up? Obviously you grew up in Penrith, or like out west, right?
Yep. St Mary's specifically.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Penrith region.
Yeah, I'm a St Clair boy actually. I grew up in St Clair.
I lived there before I moved here.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
I moved around a little bit.
And so talk me through, like what was life like at home? What was, what was the family situation? How was things at home?
Pretty well, there's nothing wrong. When I grew up in a very very conservative household, very religious household.
Yep, like a Christian household, or?
Yeah, so my family's all Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
You look more happy about that.
No, I'm just very curious about it because when people have religious upbringings, it's like I'm always curious about what is the effect on the individual. And, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got 2 siblings.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, how you might have responded to that, it might be very different to how they've responded to it too.
Very different, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so Alex would probably agree with you here. I'm somewhat of a stubborn individual. I'm kind of like pretty headstrong on what I want, and once I know what I want, I'm pretty not really going to change my mind without a good reason. I also felt that I grew up like a lot quicker than my siblings. I was a lot more independent than them as well.
Are you the oldest or?
No, I'm the middle child.
Okay.
So it's probably middle
child syndrome. Yeah, they just didn't worry about you, so you just done your own thing.
Nah. By the time I got to about 15, I started looking into the concepts and the groundwork of it a lot more than I think the other kids did. And I found that there was a lot of questions that couldn't be answered no matter who I went to. And I wasn't too happy with that, and I wasn't too happy with, like, when you grow up as a Jehovah's Witness, you miss out on a lot of things that the other kids are doing.
Birthdays,
Christmas. Even just socializing. You're not supposed to socialize Sorry?
Wizards and magic.
Wizards, magic. Yeah, I hadn't seen Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
Radio? You're not supposed to listen to radio, right? Or is
well, they would let us listen to specific stations only.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Yep.
even like The Simpsons. I didn't watch The Simpsons, nothing like that.
Yep.
But you kind of just, as you're growing up, you feel like you're kind of missing out on everything. And you're not allowed to socialize with the kids at school. And especially in high school, that becomes a big thing as well. You end up kind of isolated. Because you can only socialize with the other kids in the spiritual congregation.
Yep.
Which you're only seeing twice a week for half an hour.
Okay.
So you're kind of a little bit socially isolated
Yep.
in that way as well. So when I got to about 15, 16, I started questioning it and nobody had the answers I was looking for. It was kind of one foot out the door. But that's pretty young. So the kind of general rule of it is if you want to live in the Christian household, you need to go to church, you need to go out and preach. You need to go 3 times a week. We would all you do like 1 at home and then you do 2 in the Kingdom Hall, which is a church. You'd go do that, and then on the weekend you have to go out preaching. So the other side of that is when you rock up at your friend's door with your like parents or someone, you're preaching about the Bible, kind of copper in school as well.
Yeah.
You're the weird kid that on Sunday morning is talking about the Bible at their front doorstep.
Yep.
So you get a little bit isolated that way. And by the time I got to 16, I was kind of set on getting out of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and,
then, how do you go about getting out of it? Like,
okay, so apart from all that, I was also dating someone at the time.
okay,
So when it came down to you need to stay here and do this or you need to get out of the house, I was like, all right, I'm out of here because I was very stubborn. I was like, I'm not going to sit here. They put you through like a little bit of a process, I guess, first where they try and change your mind. They take you to the elders, which is like, I guess, the equivalent of a priest.
Yeah.
Try and change your mind on that for however long it takes. And my mind didn't change, so I was out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then, how did that impact your relationship with your family and your siblings?
I didn't. It took a long time for either of us to, I guess, kind of reach out after that. Because I didn't want a bar of that, and they technically weren't allowed to be around me while I had this attitude.
Yep.
So it took a long time. I think the first person I connected with was my younger brother. Because me and him were always very close. He grew up as he had like trouble as a kid as well because he had like very strong dyslexia. So he had trouble speaking for a long time.
Yep.
So he didn't have many friends either. So we got really close too. So me and my brother have always been really tight, and we were the kind of the first ones to reconnect after all this.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then for him, like, did he leave as well, or is he still?
No. Both my siblings are still in it.
Okay.
My brother's a really, he's just a good boy. Like he'll do anything he wants mum and dad to be happy.
Yeah.
And obviously his heart's in it. You know, you're born into it, so that's the only way you know.
Yeah.
So they're both still in it.
Did you find it scary when you decided that, hey, I'm going to make this big decision for myself that I'm out?
Yeah, it was scary, but it was also kind of a load off. Because I felt like I could finally just do things my way.
Yep.
Do what I wanted to do without all the judgment that surrounds it. You know, for the few weeks that it was all happening, every time I went to the church, I knew that everyone was looking at me thinking, like, you know, this is the problem child, you know, evil boyfriend, like all that stuff, you know. You're 16, man. Everyone has a boyfriend, you know.
Yeah.
No, I felt relief once I got out. I got into a little bit of trouble after that just because I was young, living kind of somewhat on my own. But, I kind of felt a bit more free.
Yeah. So what like out of curiosity, and you don't have to share if you don't want to share it, but what kind of trouble did you get into?
Just like the wrong crowd. So I went instantly into the workforce to pay my way around, and instantly into studying as well. And I just got involved with like people who are a lot older than me, and so I was getting into situations where it was a bit out of my depth, and just ending up in some negative situations and a bit aimless in life as far as career and goals and friends as well. I had a couple of high school friends that I still have now, which is really cool.
Yep.
But yeah, I just got a little bit lost for a while. Yeah.
So, and I'm curious about this because, you know, when you grow up with like this really sort of faith-based upbringing, and then you walk away from that, and then you feel a bit lost. Like, how did you then try and find yourself. Like, I guess, you know, from that perspective, I'm curious, you know, do you still believe there's a God, or you don't believe there's a God? Like, that's probably why I found it interesting, is because, like, you know, when you're in this situation, it's like for a lot of people, you'd probably walk away from religion altogether, right? But then for some people, it's like, you know, perhaps you still believe that there is a God, but maybe it's just not, you know, you don't believe in that structure that you have to be so regimented and follow and things like that.
I don't believe in the God in the way that it's portrayed as like one being that's above all and judges your decisions and decides whether you make it into the new world or you burn in hell.
Yeah.
I don't believe in it that way.
Yep.
But I believe in some kind of like higher power, and I believe in a lot of the I guess guidelines that is put out there by the higher power as far as like being a good person and giving back and stuff like that. But no, I don't believe in one creature that's greater than all and sits back and watches us, you know, date a boy at 16 and says you're going to hell. So no.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, so I've done a lot of reflection in terms of spirituality and religion, things like that. So for me, I grew up more Buddhist per se, because that was what my family was. And then, you know, when I was training martial arts, so I was much like you. I started karate when I was 5 and did that till I was 12, and then got really into kung fu, did kung fu for 20 odd years of my life. And by nature of doing a Chinese martial art, which is from the Shaolin Temple, you get exposed to a lot of Buddhist teaching and Buddhist spirituality. And for me, it's like, it was quite interesting that, you know, I can see how, you know, people could come to a lot of these beliefs that they had. And then my wife is like a devout Catholic. So it's like now I'm exposed to this total other side where, you know, she's very much in, you know, there's a God and blah, 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 and all this sort of stuff. And so for me, it was like, I only really had like this eye-opening moment, and I talk about it a lot, so I'm not going to share the full story, but essentially I took this drug called mescaline. It's a psychedelic, and it's distilled from a cactus, like peyote kind of a thing. And essentially, long story short, you live and die 10,000 times. Your ego gets dissolved, and then you sort of, you know, you're stuck in this sort of place viewing things from how perhaps if you're this, you know, all-powerful being without any ego, you realize that, you know, life, there's two ways that life could be. It could either be meaningless, because at the end of the day, in 100 years' time, we're all gone. We're just dust. And there's a new group of people, and we're long forgotten. And if you generally think about who you remember from history, most people will bring up the names that are of bad people first. You know, if I was to say, you know, name some famous people from history, and it's like, oh, Adolf Hitler, you know, Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, Napoleon. You know, all of them are basically warmongers, right? So that's where generally most people's brain goes to. I don't know if anyone has any positive ones, but if they have positive ones, like, you know, feel free to say, oh, these are the ones that come to my mind, and tell me that these are the most positive ones. But generally we remember all the bad people first. And so I was like, okay, so, you know, life could be absolutely meaningless, and we're just here for this one short ride, and, you know, it all disappears after that. And in 1,000 years' time, nobody's going to remember us anyway. Or the alternative was that, you know, like if you're this really powerful being, or this God or creator, so to speak, that knew everything and didn't have any ego, it's like, it makes no difference to me whether you live or die. It makes no difference to me whether you live a great life or not a great life, right? But then how it sort of resonated for me was that, you know, this idea of unconditional love was that, okay, it doesn't mean anything to me that whether you have a great life or not, but it means the world to you that you can live this amazing life and have these ups and downs. So it's like, you know, why are we here, and why did all this get created? It wasn't for God's, you know, to feel good about himself, God to feel good about himself and say, oh yeah, I built this. It was more to give each individual this opportunity to live a life that otherwise we would never live. We'd never exist, right? So yeah, I'm sorry to take it on a bit of a spiritual tangent, but I always love talking about spirituality, because I think it's just so interesting to see how people, you know, come to terms with that and how it also influences their life. Because, you know, you may not realize it at the time, but it's like, you know, sometimes there are things that happen in your life that you just go, I can't make sense of it, right? And then, you know, everybody goes through this phase where they start questioning, you know, does life have any meaning? You know, and for some people, like, you know, I had a friend who, part of the reason why I started the podcast was I had a friend who committed suicide. And so he's come to this point in life where it's like, he doesn't want to live anymore, you know, and how do you get to that point where, you know, life's not worth living anymore, right? You really, and like for him, I believe he became a Christian, you know, later in his life. But, you know, to be hurting so much, or to be going through something so significant that you no longer want to get up in the morning and you don't want to face the world is a pretty big step to take, you know? So, you know, on that note, so Alex, how about you? So in terms of growing up, you know, where did you grow up and what was life like for you growing up?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I went private school for 13 years, grew up in good areas. My parents did more than look after me. Yeah. Yeah, I've got no sad stories. I really don't. And even if I did, like, compared to what most people go through anything, I would have nothing to tell you. That would be bad. Nor would I try use it as any kind of like leverage. I had a good, simple. My parents gave me every opportunity they could. If I ever followed an interest, my mum would chase it down and try give me the best of whatever it was, the best coach, the best exposure, the best gym, whatever it was. So I was extremely lucky. Is probably the best way to put it. Yeah.
So as a kid, you know, how would you describe yourself?
Oh, fuck. Dork. Massive dork. Yeah. Fuck. Just a cringy kid. I was just, I just would dive into stuff and just obsess about it completely. And it would extract me from social settings heavily to a point where I would be a little bit just off the mark socially. And then, I just have obsessive nature. So fencing was that thing from through the entire high school that I just launched myself into.
And I guess, you know, I'm curious on this. So, you know, for your teachers, you know, how would your teachers have described both of you in school? So Alex first, then Jacinta.
Really simple. One teacher hit the nail on the head at a parent-teacher interview, and I was like, shit, you get me. She goes, Alex does the bare minimum he needs to do to get marks that he can get buy-in and be happy with, but he's not interested in being here at all.
Yeah, wow.
I was like, bingo, you nailed it.
I want to be fencing.
But I just wanted to get marks good enough to get to uni. So I got, I think I got 88 or whatever I got in my UAI, 85, and that was plenty for me. I got what I wanted. I moved on. I wasn't going to do any more than that because I wanted to be fencing. I didn't want to be studying. I didn't want to be doing schoolwork. So I'd just do enough to make sure I did well in all my stuff and just act disinterested in class for the most part.
Okay. And how about for you, Jacinta? How would your teachers have described you?
I thought it was pretty funny actually, and a lot of the time they thought I was funny too. But I think the most common feedback was unlimited potential, but just gets distracted easily, and that's the truth. Okay. If I'm not completely if it doesn't interest me, I'm not going to really try, to be honest. Were there any subjects that interested you both in high school, or was it literally all your outside interests? I really liked English. I excelled the most in English. I liked writing, story writing, and breaking down movies and books and stuff like that. I wasn't really great at maths or science, but I loved English and art and stuff like that.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, same. I went to Macquarie, did English literature, and I majored in creative writing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was good at English, nothing else.
Yeah,
horrible at maths.
Yeah, okay.
Horrible. Horrible at maths.
Really?
So bad.
Wow.
I came second last in advanced maths because I just refused to do general maths
least
because
you're
my
advanced.
ego. Advanced, I came second last. I failed everything. It was terrible. That was the worst. Sorry, go.
I was going to just ask, so with the fencing, right? So how far did you go with the fencing?
As far as I could. So I went to the World Championships. I went to the Commonwealth Championships. I did about 10 World Cups over about 3 years. And then when it came to decide if I was going to do the Olympic run, I just decided it just wasn't the path I wanted to go, and I quit. Yeah, wow. Either Olympics or move on, kind of where I was at that point.
Yep. And so what was there anything else that you had worked out that you were interested in at that point in time?
Desperately wanted to do boxing. Desperately, but my parents never let me.
Yep.
So I would train it a lot myself. I would not only I would study boxing myself, train myself. I would train with my brothers. I would organize fights with kids at school so I could have boxing fights. We just do it at the local park. Just make a makeshift ring, train for it, set a time and day like it was an event and fight. Because my parents wouldn't let me do it. So I couldn't start. I didn't really get into proper, actually being taught properly how to strike till I was about, I think it was 21. So it was outside of my parents' control by that point.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was just, when they told me it was a solid no, fencing was the thing
the go-to.
The go-to.
Yeah. Okay. And then how about for you, Jacinta?
Other interests?
Yeah.
Not particularly. I didn't know what to study out of school, but I wanted to do something, so I didn't look like a complete bum. And I ended up just doing a local business course and working in a bunch of different jobs. And then eventually I found a decent job in sales and worked my way up from there, and ended up in a pretty good position from there.
Yeah.
But that's all kind of taken, like, I guess it's been put on the back burner because the priority since I've turned probably like since I went pro, so maybe like 20, I don't know how old I was, 25.
Yep.
The priority has been fighting, so I've put all that on the back burner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, yeah, you're in the prime of your career at the moment. Like, you're heading towards the prime of your career at the moment. So it's really important that you make the most of this period of time and really enjoy it too.
There's nothing else I want to do.
Yeah.
So like once I found fighting and it was kickboxing at first, I was like, this is what I need to do. Nothing else.
Yep.
Nothing else interested me. Not even any other sport.
What do you think about it? In what is it in kickboxing or what is it in fighting that really like sort of attracted you? And the reason why I ask that is because there's probably a lot of females out there who might be scared to, just like you when you first went to follow your friend to UTC, and it's all guys training and it's a very intimidating environment from that perspective because you go, oh, there's no other girls here. Like, what do I do? Like, what was it that you sort of found attractive once you started to get into it?
Well, as a kid, like I wanted to do karate. I wanted to do a combat sport. I didn't really know about boxing or kickboxing too much. I wanted to do karate because that's what I saw on TV. But again, same as Alex, my parents weren't for it. So I just did little athletics throughout school for my sport. But once I started, I don't know exactly what it is that grabs your attention. I think it's obviously you're getting fit, you're having fun, it's social. I wasn't very good at it when I started, so I'm not going to put it down to that.
Yep.
But I think there was just like a level of focus that it gave me, and I guess like a level of once you've been in it for a while, some sort of empowerment and self-control over yourself a bit more as well. So yeah, I think it's just I loved the lifestyle that it was already giving me of structure and confidence and just like ambition as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then from that perspective, like do you find that you work best with routines?
Yes,
yep.
Definitely.
And from that perspective then, were you very routine driven before you got into martial arts?
No, not particularly. No, not really. Go to work. What else? I wasn't really doing anything else. Get up, go to work, finish work, go study at night, come home, crash on the couch, do it again.
Yep.
And then on the weekend, like go out and party because it's the weekend and it's the only free time you have. And,
yep.
and overdo it and then not actually really have a good time. And yeah.
So when did you come to that realization that, hey, this partying doesn't really help me at all in life?
Well, actually, I never really loved it. I kind of just went because everyone else was going. And what else are you going to do if your friends are all out? And you kind of feel like a bit of a loser if you're sitting at home while all your friends are out. So I just went because everyone else was going. But I was always the first to bail any excuse. Like as soon as they were blind drunk and didn't notice that I could
drop
sneak
the smoke
off,
bomb at
I'd
you go.
Sneak off.
Yeah.
And then, I think once you get a little bit older and then once I had the structure of kickboxing as well, like my coach back then was really on me about, I want to see you here 3 times a week at this time to this time every single week. Once I had something to put my attention on, it was easier to say no to the other things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I very much skipped out on most social things when I was in like uni and things like that because I was always at training.
Yeah, but you feel like a weirdo. It makes you feel like a bit of a like a hermit or like antisocial, but it's just you don't want that kind of socialization. You'll find for other socialization.
Yeah, you got to pick and choose, right? You got to be selective about the environments that you want to be in, and like for me, I think I was like I grew up as this real sort of tight ass. They used to call me like Mr. 5 cent picker, in high school because if there was 5 cents on the ground, I'm gonna pick it up. Like it's right. Like so they used to people used to make fun of me being a real cheapskate, right? But if it's 5 cents, 5 cents. Like just take it, right? Why wouldn't you? Right? It's free money. So as a result of that, like I probably wasn't the best person to go party with because I wouldn't want to spend money anyway. Like, I don't want to pay like a $25 cover charge to go into some shitty venue where I'm going to have to spend more money to, get drinks or whatever. Like, just don't go. Like, rather just go to training, And then, so I always thought, from that perspective, it's like most people, they generally find either positive things or negative things, and they can both be either painful or fun. It just depends on your mindset, but. I'm actually, I'm quite grateful that I lived this life where I was like, so focused on just, doing martial arts and enjoying my life through that avenue that I don't really feel like I missed out on much, Yes, it probably hurt a lot of friendships. You know, there was probably some friends that probably got upset that, you know, whether like, and I would turn up to parties, but I'd just be late. Like I'd go to training first, and then if it's on a Friday night, you know, you only don't expect to see me before 10:30. It'll be like, you know, go to training, get that out of the way, go home, have a shower, then go out. So, you know, that was just how I chose to do it, and there's no right or wrong in it. But I just feel like long term, like there were things that have allowed me to just, you know, be really regimented in my own structure, and it's like, you know, having a discipline, right? And it's not about the motivation to be able to get up in the morning. It's about, you know, having the discipline to just keep going, even when you don't feel your best, even when you're sick or whatever the case may be, within reason. So that, you know, in the long run, eventually it's not a matter of if something's going to happen. It's only about when it's going to happen, you know? So if you've got the right people around you and you've got the right routines and structure, like it's only a matter of when, you know? And then, you know, for some people, it's just, maybe they don't start, you know, early enough in life. You know, they don't get into competition early enough in life. And for some others, they start too early. You know, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu dads that push their kids so hard that by the time they become 15, 16-year-olds, they're just, I don't want to do this anymore, you know? So I always find that really, really interesting because, you know, I always like to say that for me personally, I'm not a fighter, I'm a martial artist. Like I'll still be training, you know, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. The rest of my life, I'm going to be living a martial arts lifestyle. Whereas for a lot of people, you know, and you'd probably see this a lot, Alex, you get guys that come into the gym or girls that come into the gym and go, I want to have a fight. They might have one fight and you never see them again. Yeah. So I guess, you know, talk to me a little bit about your martial arts journey. So after the fencing, you got into boxing.
Yeah, I went to Bulldogs, Castle, started kickboxing.
Yep.
Yeah, and then pretty much from then decided I was going to just do this as hard as I possibly could. I needed something to fill the gap from fencing. I was just having a little thought there based on what you were saying. We're talking, it's kind of funny how I believe what you're saying there kind of ties into the religious stuff we were talking about before, where I've always felt a big part of religion is having to manufacture purpose for a large amount of people, for masses. And I believe part of your own life is manufacturing your own purpose. And I think for most martial artists at that time in their life, especially your early 20s or your teenage years, you have such a distinct purpose that you prioritize it because it becomes your identity. And I think when you're driven by that purpose, you're not being social, you feel like maybe you're missing out, but that's not going to feel worse than not going to training. Like I said, once that becomes your thing, you fall back on and makes you feel like you are who you are when you're at the gym. You're not really going to give a fuck about dancing on a Saturday night or drinking. When I lost that with fencing, that was a big hole to do something so obsessively and I stopped it dead dry, didn't touch it, didn't train it, sold all my equipment, just completely cut it dry just because it had such a bad exit experience. So that was a weird transition period, but then fighting just filled that eventually very well.
Yeah.
I just dove straight into that.
Yep. Okay. So then from that perspective, I like what you, how you sort of related that back, because when it comes to purpose, it's like, everybody's got different things that they're interested in, right? And so sometimes it's like they're influenced by their friends or whatever, but sometimes it's just innate, you know? Like there's just this thing in you, and there's no other way to, I could say you could describe it other than it's like, it could be like a God-given purpose. Because at the end of the day, at least from what I found, so I had a, you know, very good career in the automotive industry and, you know, started as an apprentice mechanic and worked my way through till I was running businesses for large groups and things like that. And like I used to think, you know, once I get to this level, it's going to change my life, you know? And so I was 28 when it happened because I started working for Automotive Holdings Group, and so they're now part of AP Eagers, which is a really large dealer group. But at the time, they had just taken over the Castle Holden franchise. So it used to be Heartland Holden, and then they lost the franchise and ASG won the rights to it. And I had started working at ASG as like an area manager for them. They call it an operations executive. And I'd always wanted to be like a general manager or a dealer principal at a dealership. That was like, you know, part of my goals. You know, I'm going to get there by the time I'm 32. That was the whole thing that I had in my mind. And then when I was 28, I was working at this company, and the person that they had employed in that capacity quit for whatever reason. It was too hard, right? And my boss at the time, Chad, said to me, well, Johnny, you know, this is the opportunity you wanted. Here you go. You make it work. It's yours. And here I was thinking, you know, I got 4 years left to achieve this goal, and, you know, I got there, you know, 4 years earlier than what I had anticipated. But then I realized that, hey, just because I now got this title and I've achieved this goal, like it didn't change my life one bit. I was so fixated on this goal that it didn't really, when I got there, it felt almost hollow. Like, you know, I was sort of beside myself, and I sort of became a bit aimless. Like I didn't have a purpose anymore. I didn't really know what the purpose was. And so that's why I think it's really interesting, because I feel like everybody has to go through that. It's like a stepping stone in life, that you need to have this goal that you're really chasing and you're hungry for. And then once you attain it, and if you really want it, it's only a matter of when, not if. So when you attain it, then you sort of go through this realization of, oh, now what?
Yeah, what I've noticed with goals in a general sense, when you set bigger life goals, everything up until that point of the goal is usually very carefully planned down to dates, times, feelings, but everything after that's a very broad sense of how it'll affect your life. So when it's done, you've gone from such incremental steps and everything's gone to plan to having such a bigger idea of having a microcosm to a macro, and now you're sitting there thinking, I never really thought too far past this goal. I just had a bigger idea of everything. Something will happen. I don't know what that thing is, but I'm just hoping it would happen. And when it kind of doesn't, it leaves you in a really like weird spot, and you don't know how to go back to replanning little again because you don't know what you're going for anymore. Yeah. And so that's where I think, you know, that's when having those routines and those disciplines set up, so that, you know, even when you achieve the world titles and all that sort of stuff, like they're just the things that you collect along the way. Like they're never the end journey. It's like these are the things that you collect along the way. And I think the hard part for most fighters is that, you know, if they don't really set up some of those disciplines when they're in their career, it's like at the end of the career, all they had was fighting. And the problem is that you can't fight forever. So, you know, that's one of the things that I'm always very big on, is just, you know, you got to think about how you find things that you enjoy that you can do consistently on a daily basis. Like, and so, you know, that's why some fighters will go into coaching and they'll do that sort of stuff so that they can still stay in the thing that they love, if they love it. But some fighters don't like coaching. It's a very different animal when you're now responsible for somebody else. And, you know, and you probably know this, you know, like when you got, for lack of a better word, retards who don't listen, or you tell them to throw something and then, you know, or you get punched in the face because they didn't hit the pad properly. Like, you know, it happens, right? Like that's a part of the game. But I guess, you know, from that perspective, Jacinta, I'm sort of curious, you know, like I know that you built yourself up a bit of a career in sales. Like, what are some of the things that you've learnt, you know, from the working side of things that you sort of like to apply broader in your life?
I don't know. I think being in sales taught me a lot about dealing with other people. Especially when I was mentioning that I don't feel like I had much exposure to a good level of socialization as a kid. I feel like being in the workforce, that's where I learned all of that. Yep. And I learned how to I guess get along with people and relate to them a bit better. Yep. And just learned to be like a more complete person a little bit, I think. Yep. I learned how to sort of work to get things that I need, because obviously I need to reach targets. I need to lock deals in, lock clients in. So I learned how to get people on my side and to show them that I was on their side. So yeah, I think I've been in that industry for about 8 years now. I think spending that time is going to help me in the future with whatever I decide to do after fighting. Yeah, it's funny, like sales is one of those things that puts you in an environment where you're going to get a lot of repetitions in terms of, like, you know, meeting new people, trying to establish relationships. It's not personal, you know, like it's not like, you know, you personally are invested in that relationship. It's like you're also trying to fulfill a job. So I think, and where I think that's a good thing is because you can sort of compartmentalize, you know, your own personal attitude towards it. Like a lot of people are scared to put themselves out there because it's like, oh, what if I get rejected, right? But when you're forced to do it from a sales perspective, it's like, well, I want to get money. I want to make money. Right? I need to get paid. Yeah. So you keep forcing yourself to get back out there and get back out there and get back out there. And then through habit of doing that, then you go, oh, you know, it wasn't that bad. Like getting rejected is not that bad. I can do this in my personal life too. I can do it in so many other aspects that I can apply that to, right? Yeah. First week on the job, I got rejected with every meeting that I went to. Yep. When I started going out on my own, I got rejected like all 4 in that first week, and I just sat in my car and cried for a while. And then I told my boss about it, and he's like that's all right. Like your strike rate's not going to be very high, especially at the beginning, because he kind of took me on as a bit of a trainee. Yep. He kind of saw I didn't have too many skills at the time or too many qualifications. He took me on as a trainee and taught me on the job. And then so I failed a lot first, but then once you learn to present yourself a bit better and speak with a bit more confidence and market your personality right as well,
Yeah.
you have a bit more success.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So, Alex, for you, you know, you mentioned you studied literature and things like that at university. So when you finished school, like when you had this, you would have had this hole in yourself from the fencing thing. But how did you then work out? Okay, this is, you know, now it's kickboxing, and then when did the jiu-jitsu come into it? Like when did the rest of it start to come together?
Jiu-jitsu came into it when I put myself down for a MMA tournament. It was like a C-class judo tournament.
Okay.
And I'd done 2 months at Bulldogs, and I figured that'd be enough to cut it. So I went to VT1 because I found them by pure chance on the net. They were at Gordon. I lived in Sinai. So I went down. I was like, listen, next Sunday, I got a fight coming up. Do you mind if I do some training here? They're like, oh, cool. Where you been training? And I was like, at Bulldogs. Like, where are you doing your jits? I was like, nowhere. They're like, so what are you going to do? I'm like, that's why I'm here. You guys going to teach me? They're like, it doesn't work like that. I was like, I just plan to just go in there and fight. I'll be all right. I'll figure it out. So thank God the tournament got cancelled, and I did a jits comp that Sunday, got submitted very quickly in the first round, and then thought, all right, I'm going to do some jiu-jitsu. And I started with Liam from there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you say, okay. Yeah. So, you know, Liam Resnikov and Dylan over at VT1, you know, I know those guys quite well because, and I'm not going to talk about my mate Dexter, but I always talk about him, but he also trains there. He's a brown belt there. And so for me, I had a very similar sort of experience to you in the sense that, so when my exposure to grappling was more like rolling with Dexter in basically my house. You know, we'd come over, I had mats, you know, we'd muck around and blah, blah, blah. And I'd throw weird shit at him because, you know, I hadn't had any formal grappling experience. But, you know, through what I'd learnt through Kung Fu and things like that, like I just throw things that he wouldn't expect. Because he used to always say, oh, you don't move like a jiu-jitsu guy. So it would give him different problems to solve. And at the time, he was only a white belt. But then I remember it's actually so at my Bucks party, the guys had organised for us to go to a gym down in Penrith. I can't remember which gym it was. But basically, you know, my Bucks party for the first half of the day was 20 or so guys getting put through the ringer, having to grapple each other, having to smash each other in the cage, and just a really good time. But I actually remember when we were doing King of the Mat, so I was obviously, you know, playing the seated position, and Dex caught me with like first time he's ever caught me, and it was like with a triangle or something like that. And I was like, fuck, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on some of this shit, right? And I always, one of the other experiences that I had, so back then I used to do pancration. So there was like PCYC used to run the pancration tournaments. Yep. And I actually think, you know, I talk about this quite a bit because it's one of those things where people go, oh, you know, winning's good and losing's bad, right? But my actual experience is that there is no good and bad. It's just more what you take away from it, because I won my first fight, but I actually think that set me back in my development, because it was like, use that as a bit of an excuse. You know, I actually won my first fight by like a Keskatami, like side, you know, the scarf hold. Yeah. And like it wasn't really anything technical. It was literally like the guy tried to take me down, and I sort of did a really primitive version of a Koshiwaza and hip throwed him over me, and then just landed on that top position and just choked the shit out of him, squeezed as hard as I could until he tapped. Right? And so from that, you know, when you have an experience like that, you sort of go away from it and you go, oh, you know, I can win, you know, like I don't need to change anything. And then, you know, then you lose. And it's like, oh, but I know I can still win, you know, I don't need to change anything. And I really think that set my martial arts development back about 5 years, because I had this mentality where it's like, oh, I can win, I don't need to change anything. But then you start putting together a few losses, and then you go, oh, okay, maybe I need to change something.
Yeah, and then in terms of students, a lot of people quit at that point. So if you have a student that's coming and they kind of have a little bit of natural talent, so you give them a few compliments and you're moving well and you're kicking the pad well, and then they keep coming but they're not applying themselves, so they're not really improving. So now, rather than saying all the good stuff they're doing, you're trying to point out stuff to help them, they're now disinterested in it because it's not giving them that same feeling of I can just show up and be good at this. And a lot quit at that point. So I had to change the way I coached for that exact thing, that when people start that I need to actually apply myself to this. A lot of people don't want to. They just want that feeling of winning or being told by the coach you're kicking that pad really well. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah. So how did that change the way that you coach? So like, how would you put that in practice?
Stop complimenting people when they come.
Yep.
I can second
Give him
that.
nothing. Give him
He
nothing.
doesn't compliment
Yeah.
people.
So the first idea when I first opened the gym was when people come, give them like an uplifting environment, tell them they're doing well, encourage them. But then as soon as that stopped, they weren't interested in the training part of it. So I thought I just wound that all the way back, and I made people earn the compliments. So once the compliments changed from you naturally just do this really well, you're really good at this naturally, to you've been here really consistently, I see you're improving. I see you've been trying hard, and it's good to see it in your kick. And that changed my dynamic with my students really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I always talk about is that, like, when we're young, we're sort of always conditioned that things are either good or bad, you know, and you can probably, you know, attest to this in the environment that you're in. You know, you got a boyfriend and you're the hell girl, you know, you're the bad one. But, you know, I think one of the things that I'm really like big on at the moment is thinking about things in terms of action and consequence. You know, so the consequence, it could either be positive or negative. It depends how you frame it. But thinking in terms of good and bad, you're already focused on something that's happened. You can't change it. You're living in the past. Like it's already done. Whereas if you think about things as action and consequence, you can really make an impact in terms of how you approach things for the future. You know, I can't really control the consequence that's already happened in the past, but I can say, okay, if I do this today, then tomorrow I might be better at this position or be better at X, Y, Z. So, you know, I find that's a really interesting concept for a lot of people to try and get their head around, because most people, they think, you know, oh, I lost a fight, oh, that's bad, right? Or I won a fight, that's good. Or I got a speeding fine, that's bad. But like that doesn't actually help you to then rethink your decisions going forward. Whereas thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, I lost this position. Okay, why did I lose that position? What was the action that led to that consequence? It's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. Yeah. So how about you, for you, Jacinta, like how did you then, get your exposure into MMA? Because, you know, you did your kickboxing fights and then?
Yeah. So the first experience with MMA wasn't the most fun for me. So I was over, I'd always kind of thought about it. I was interested in MMA because I watch it a lot. Like, well, not a lot, but whenever it was on, I watch it on TV. And I thought, you know, maybe one day I could do that.
Yep.
But I'd always say one day and not do much about it. Plus, I thought I was, in my mind, I thought I was going to be like a kickboxing star. I thought I was going to go to, I loved Glory at that time. So I thought I was going to go to Glory kickboxing. Then I thought I was going to go to One Championship. I ended up doing some training in Japan with K1. So I thought I was going to end up in K1. And then while I was competing over in New Zealand for K1, I went over there with another Aussie girl who I ended up fighting again as a pro. She was on the MMA team, I was on the kickboxing team. And then the girl she was supposed to verse over in New Zealand pulled out. So she was left in New Zealand with no fight. So they just asked me if I would do it. And I just kind of thought that if I went in there and just was the kickboxer, that I would beat her.
Yeah.
Wasn't the case. I didn't do too bad. Like, went out to a decision. It wasn't terrible.
Split, wasn't it? Oh, no, I thought it was
I
on
don't
your
know.
topology as a split.
It might be a split. I'm not sure. I definitely won a round. There you go.
Okay, you got one. You got one.
I got one. Yeah, I got one. So that was kind of that was the first time I'd ever been like I got mounted, got held down and punched a little bit. That was my first exposure to that. So it was a bit of a smack in the face, literally. But then after that, I was like, you know, that's kind of cool. I wouldn't mind doing that at all.
Yep.
But then I was so set on this K1 career, this K1 Muay Thai career, that I didn't want to take any attention away from that either. So I stuck with the K1 Muay Thai, went pro. And then, like, because I was on a big winning streak as well. I think I'd won like 12 in a row or something like that. And then in this little transitional period, my kickboxing coach, who was an older man, he was about 60, had to stop teaching me. His wife got very sick. And he was just like, he wasn't a full-time coach like Alex is. He was just he worked for like Sydney Water, and he'd come in twice a week and teach kickboxing because that's what he did when he grew up. Yeah, he loved it. Yeah. It was just a hobby for him. So he couldn't come in anymore on the weeknights anymore with his wife was going through chemo. So at that point I went into my second pro Muay Thai fight without him. I did have Anthony there, but at this point me and Anthony are only training together once a week, twice a week for boxing. You know, boxing is very different to Muay Thai. You're not really going to box your way into a victory in Muay Thai, especially on Rebellion Muay Thai, which is very about the
Kick and clinch
the
focused.
style
Yep.
and the traditional style
Yep.
of Muay Thai. So I lost that fight, so that ended my little winning streak that I was so protective of keeping. And I realized it wasn't even that bad when I lost.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a bad loss. I didn't get smashed. I just didn't get the decision on the night.
Mm.
And
Isn't it a bit freeing? Like, you know,
Yeah,
you
it
felt more
was.
free as a
Yeah.
result of it. Like this
Yeah.
thing, it's just a number,
yeah,
but it makes you have all these reservations. But then once you don't worry about it anymore, it actually allows you to be more free in how you express yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was terrified of like losing my little streak and
Yeah.
losing my little reputation. But then I lost it. And I was working with, I can't even remember who was organising it for me. Someone was booking me fights. It was Craig. Craig was booking me fights. So he'd booked me 3 more after that. He said, you're going to get straight back in the win column. You're going to win 2 weeks later against another like real Muay Thai girl. My style's never been very like traditional Muay Thai. So sometimes I don't fare so well on the with the judges. I'm more of a K1 style. Yeah. So that happened, and then I was ready to was going to fight again in 2 weeks, pick myself back up and fight again. And I was always talking back and forth with Alex. This is like since I met him after my first amateur fight. So this is going back 7 years now.
Wow.
Maybe 8 years.
Yep.
So we were always talking in the background. Alex is the one who encouraged me to have the amateur boxing fights to fill the time and skill develop as well.
Yeah.
And we used to be out here sparring in fight camp once a week because there was a good little team of kickboxers here. There's also Holly, who I used to box with a lot. So we met up in this little period where I felt like I had no coach and no one to guide me, and I was fighting again in like a week later. So we met up. Alex drove all the way to UFCG Blacktown.
Yep.
Just to hold some pads for me and correct a few things. And a lot of things. And I remember, the thing I remember so significantly about it is like I had this big session in my mind about he's going to show me all this cool stuff and we're going to learn all this technique and he's going to smash me on the pads. And I threw one cross and out comes the little slow motion camera. And he brings out his camera, records me in slow motion. I have to sit there and watch it and realize how terrible it is.
Imagine if we still had that video. Imagine if I could
We
find that
probably-
video.
yeah, maybe on our old
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was rough.
I remember it, it was just very eye-opening watching. I'd never sat there and watched my cross and had someone realize, someone had someone point out how incorrect it was. And by this point, before this loss, I thought I was pretty, I thought it was pretty good. Yeah. I float my own horn a little bit.
Yeah.
And after that session, I realized it wasn't as good as I thought, and I'd lost the fight. So it just raised a lot of questions for
And
me.
lockdown.
And then
Lockdown cancelled the
so
fight, and then you were
the fight
stuck
was
with
off.
what do I do now?
Yeah.
Got no fights. I got no training, no foreseeable. Gyms are open. What do
Yeah.
I do with myself now?
Yeah.
That's
I wasn't
where you
getting
were.
any career momentum as
You
well.
were
Yeah.
pretty
So-
lost.
Yeah. So then in COVID came like the next week. So I was kind of relieved the fight was off actually, because I was also really struggling with physically with my weight and to keep it down, and I just felt terrible everywhere.
Yeah.
So it was a blessing that got canned, and then from there, that's it. Me and Alex just started meeting up.
Yep.
Not in COVID.
Not
Not in COVID.
Secretly
not at
to
the-
train
not-
every
not-
day.
not at the
lockdown?
gym.
What?
I did
No.
not leave my postcode.
There was not paper up on the glass windows. What? I didn't put that there. What's
Yeah.
that doing there?
So a few times a week, and
A few times a week, pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
We met a lot in that
Yeah.
first lockdown, pretty much every day, and we invited people in as her partners that were desperate to train.
Yeah.
And we just have me and her sessions, or her and another girl, which we would just use routinely during that lockdown. Everyone was so desperate to train. If we
Yeah.
offered anyone mat time,
They'd be
everyone
there.
jumped on it.
100%.
We did not struggle for training partners during that first lockdown.
Yep.
Well, yeah, it was like kind of a weird spot because I didn't know where I was going. I felt like a bit lost. I wasn't getting any momentum that I wanted. I just lost my fight. Couldn't keep my weight down, even though the weight class was pretty heavy for me. And I also had never really had a full-time coach. So when me and Alex first had this conversation about if we were going to work together, how it was going to be,
Yep.
I was like shocked. I was like, what? Like, I'm going to have attention from you every day?
Yep.
Like, you're going to coach me every day?
Yeah.
So that was amazing to me. At first, I think you were very honest with the way you said it, like kind of confrontingly honest about how it had to be.
Like I am with everything.
Yeah.
When am I not confrontingly honest?
Yeah. So we trained all through COVID. I learned the basics on how to grapple. I told Alex I wanted to do MMA. He said, if you want to do MMA with me, this is how it's going to be.
Yep.
I'm going to control every part of your training and tell you what
You
to
need
do.
to move here.
Yep.
You need to leave your home and move here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the first, I think maybe 3 or 4 months after we were training together, I was like, yep, I need to move here. Yep. If I want to do something, I can't be traveling in like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need the convenience factor because, training's already hard enough without having to add in, now I've got to battle traffic. And
yeah.
now
and then if he wants me to come back the next morning as well,
and at random times, so like in lockdown, we'd be on the couch, like, what are you doing? It's a bit like 7:30 and I was like, do you want to go roll? And we'd open up the gym and we go roll. Being able to be like 10 minutes from the gym as opposed to an hour. But part of it was letting go of her old gym. So part of the transition period was her not wanting to feel like she betrayed UTC. So the transition period was more an emotional one for her than like a technical one. And then when everyone as she left UTC, a few actually disbanded of the main members. And then that was that for her. Once your main training partners left and no one cared anymore, you moved full time to us because you didn't have that guilt anymore at UTC.
Yeah.
I felt like I'd created a little group of fighters there, especially girls.
Yeah.
Like I created like a little girl group. And then by leaving, I felt like I was kind of letting them all down and like turning my back on them, pretending I was too good for them now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that. And actually, when I sat down and told them what I wanted to do, that everyone was all for it. They're like, off you go. Like, you have so much that you can do.
Yeah.
Like, because they could see it from there. Like, I wasn't very technical, but I always have had so much drive to be better. I just didn't know how to go about being better.
Yeah. It's one of those things when it comes to, culture in places and whether it's gyms or workplaces, right? It's actually the people that drive it. A lot of times people go, you can learn jiu-jitsu anywhere, but, you can learn anything anywhere. But do you actually want to be in that environment? Is that the culture that's right for you? And a lot of the times, there are coaches that get it wrong because they go, if I necessarily just teach good shit, people will come. Yeah, but if they don't feel like you're actually articulating it well or, you're actually focusing on their development, like that can also obviously cause people to leave, right? On the flip side, gyms are such hard business because focusing on fighters doesn't necessarily pay the bills, as Alex would know. So, you need to then have the kids classes and all of those sorts of things, like your hobbyists. You really have to gear towards the hobbies because these are the guys that keep the doors open, right? So I guess, I'd like to sort of talk to you a little bit about, starting the whole Carioti MMA and, what was the catalyst for you deciding, hey, I'm going to go into this full time and also a little bit about some of the struggles that you've had, obviously, doing this whole venture.
Yeah, so it started from, I came back from Canada. I moved there to become a full-time fighter. Trained twice a day, 6 days a week. Couldn't get fights booked. Did a lot of amateur boxing fights over there. Couldn't get the MMA fight booked. It only got legalized in Ontario the week I arrived. So there weren't events. You couldn't get on events. There were only fights in Montreal. Everyone wanted on, so you just couldn't get fights. So through a few experiences made me realize I wasn't going to chase this anymore. I came back and quit altogether, not by intention, but I picked up a manager role at a restaurant that my family had owned. And they were rostering me on. I had to work a minimum on paper 50 hours. But obviously I worked way more, so training was impossible. I was way too fatigued. When you do 4 doubles in a week, double shifts, you're done.
Yep.
So after probably almost 2 years of that, I think I put on maybe 16 kilos.
Wow.
Hadn't trained in almost 2 years. Just thought, this is definitely not what I want with myself. Day I quit that, fucking a week later, opened up the gym and just from such a I don't want this drove me so much to what I do want.
Yeah.
So we just rented out a 1-bedroom apartment, 4 stories up in a building, and made it a gym, which was illegal to do. But we just laid mats down in the lounge area, and we called it a gym. It wasn't a gym. It was a really crappy apartment. It was fucking shitty. It was $12,500 a year though.
Yep.
So that's good rental. Used to charge $19 a week to train, and first it was just me and probably my friends that started, and then it just created this very quick and really cool environment. So we after 10 months, we were getting too big for it, which was exciting, but too big for it was 20 people.
Yeah.
And then we moved on from there. What I didn't expect was when we moved to a much bigger gym that it was a business now and you couldn't run it like you did the old gym. So I learned some really valuable and hard business lessons now that it was a business. Now that I had a full rental had gone up 5 times the amount. Now I was managing direct debits, clients, complaints, insurances. It wasn't a business before. We were just friends in an apartment.
Yep.
I learned very quickly that running a business is very hard. And then financially, the business just nosedived because I didn't know how to run a business.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to spend, didn't know how to budget. I ordered lots of merch from Pakistan, never came, took my money. Like
No way.
all these things you just learn in your first years. So grinding out, I had to actually go back to work full time, and then come run the gym at night. So it was 7 to 3 at the full-time job, 4 to 9 at the gym.
Yeah.
When I'd done that enough, that I'd saved up enough money from the full-time job and learnt enough that I knew I could run a business, expanded it. I just took the gamble, put all the money I'd saved into it, and it took.
Yep.
I'd learnt enough over those first 3 years of fucking everything up.
Trial by fire.
Yeah, it was, because I never did a business degree. I didn't have much help with running the business. Like for the most part, when I ran the business, I was mostly told that it was a bad idea, and people weren't wrong, because there's only one way to make gyms work, and that is to invest yourself in it completely and your own money. And even then, even if you're good at it, the upside isn't very high. When you've come from a high paying job or a good position, your family or your friends are going to say, just stick with that. You're doing well.
Yep.
So you go backwards in life when you open a gym. And so there's a very, very few of us that can run a gym that is quite successful for the amount of time we put in.
Yeah.
Like if you actually took passion out of it, if we didn't like this so much, you wouldn't do this for a
No,
living.
of course not.
You just do this because you can't do anything else with your life.
Yeah.
Because if I did anything else, I'd be miserable. But to make these good, like not saying where I want to be, but even to get to where we are now. Yeah. There's the amount you get paid for the time you're putting in for the first 7 years. It's ridiculously bad. Yeah. Thank God I was younger. I was 25 when I opened the gym. So the bills weren't too bad. I just had my rental, my phone, cars and whatever. But then when the kids come along and stuff like that and your family expenses come up, you've really got to know how to drive a business. You got to know how to get members. You know what I mean? Not train fighters. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's why you got to tailor to the kids. You got to tailor to the hobbyists. But on the same token, what got me was when I focused so much on the business, I felt my dream was dying of having fighters, and I promised myself I wasn't going to let that die, that if it meant doubling down on just doing double the amount of work, I was just going to do it, because I wasn't going to build this to not have fighters. I was just going to try have both. Yeah, it's such a hard balance, right? Like Liam actually was the one that said it pretty well. He's like, different gyms offer different things, like if you for some gyms it's great for the hobbyist, they're great for the weekend grappler that wants to compete at, grappling industries or whatever else. And there are other gyms that, are so focused on, pros. Like, so, Luke Martin over at SWMA, he's probably got the highest level room at the present moment because all the highest level people are going there. He had 2 of the ADCC competitors out of Australia in Skinner and Josh Saunders, but every gym's different. Where I do my jits at Integrated Combat Center, like Dave and Steve run a great business, like they try and cater to all the different markets, because you got to pay the bills, right? Like if you can't survive, it's very hard to then try and take people to that next level. So, it's a challenge, and I don't envy, any gym owners. But, I like coaching as well. Like I think it's just, when you got passion for martial arts, you always want to share it. It's one of those things. But switching gears a little bit, I'm curious about how the Juggernaut came to be. Why is it the Juggernaut?
Their name?
Yeah. There's got to be a story there, right?
When a mummy and a daddy love each other very much.
Whoa.
I think I've told this story a few times. So we're at fight number 8 or so, something around that. And I was doing quite well at this point. Everyone's like, you need a fight name. I couldn't think of anything. And then I was one of the kids I actually trained with. He's still boxing now, actually. But he was about 12 years old. His name was Kyle. And he's like, the Juggernaut. And I was like, what the fuck? And then and then I Googled it. And once I read the definition, I was like, this is perfect. Like if you Google it, I think the first thing that comes up is forward-moving, powerful, and overwhelming force. Yeah. So, and that was pretty descriptive of how I was fighting at the time as well. It was very even more so than I am now. I was very forward and just very aggressive in the way I fought. So it was perfect. Sounded good.
Yep.
Stuck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As well the J's, right?
All the J's.
all the J's, the alliteration.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Gotta have alliteration.
So when it comes to your when you fight, when you have opponents picked in terms of your fights are booked and things like that, like how much specific work do you do tailored around that opponent versus, and you don't have to give it all away, but how much?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
I personally don't watch so much.
Yep.
Like I'll watch their recent fights and I'll watch a little bit. But somebody else will obsess over it, will break it down, I swear, frame from frame. And
Send you pictures.
send me
frame from frame.
messages at 3 a.m. about things they do and ways they can be exploited and things I do well versus what they do bad.
Yep.
So I watch a little bit just to get an idea of what I'm going to be in there with, but all the game plan for like the specific preparation is all Alex. He sits there and he obsesses over it. You mentioned about that obsessive personality before. He'll just sit there and watch everything and okay, so for this fight that's coming up now, I was out of sleep because I need my 10 hours, right? And I got message after message from him like all hours of the morning. And he's like, so I sat down and I watched your fight in October 2020 or 2021. And then I watched her fight in November 2021. And you versus her now, this is what you do well versus what she does well. And he'll sit there with 2 screens and watch them both and see how we measure up.
So what I figured, I did a timeline of all their fights, all like fighting back for the last 3 years. And I tried to match who would win at which point when you fought, because I wanted to see who, since entering MMA 3 years ago, had progressed the fastest, because it was important to me to know that if the kickboxing evened out, because you both took your attention off your kickboxing, who had accelerated most in MMA. And why that was important to me is because I needed to understand that depending on where we took the fight, I needed to know who had improved most in those areas. So if we took the fight there, who would win? So I needed to isolate the skill sets comparatively over time and understand that, okay, she hasn't fought for 6 months, the other guy hasn't fought for 8 months. Where could I both expect them to be at this time? Because I'm very aware of her progression, but I had to make a prediction of Josephine's progression so I could understand what we could expect skill-wise, because you can't fight the video of 8 months ago. It's never the person. It's not like they're established athletes to a point where they kind of are in their style. They're developing so fast that you can make the wrong game plan on the assumption that they're going to behave that way. The only thing I can make a game plan on is predictions and on things that I see consistently over years. So because I've found at least 9 fights to work with, I can make certain predictions on habits that I link more to her personality. Like I get a sense of who she is as a person after watching enough interviews and stuff with her that I can match some of her behaviors. But the skill-wise stuff, if you look 8 months ago, she doesn't defend the double well, she probably will now. So you can't predict that. You're just going to hit her with the takedown that so-and-so hit her with 8 months ago. It's not going to work. So there's method to it. It just takes a lot of hours. Just like
it's worked every time. So.
Yeah. Well, see, I like that because you have a very cerebral approach to it. I'm very much the same. You know, when I go to study things, I go deep. Like I'm watching post-fight interviews and everything to try and get a really good picture about what's actually been put together. Can I ask then for both of you guys, you know, who are some of the influences that have like influenced your thinking and your approach to martial arts? So obviously, you know, Jacinta, from your perspective, you got Alex, a big influence there. Probably also Anthony Redwood as well. But like, I guess, you know, are there any other external influences that, or people that, you know, you enjoy watching fight that sort of influence your style, that you sort of take things from?
I got a lot of fighters I like to watch. The list goes on and on. But I think the biggest influence for me has been my corner, has been Alex and Anthony. We've got Kung in my corner as well, who was I was doing kickboxing with for the first few years. Listening to, I think it's different because Alex is kind of a bit younger than a lot of coaches. So I've got to watch him compete at the same time as me. So I fought, I think, 3 weeks before Alex fought pro boxing. So we're in camp at the same time, but he's also teaching me. So I've gotten to watch how he deals with it and how and I think the most inspirational part for me has been I've gotten to watch Alex go through jiu-jitsu and then boxing and then MMA and adjust to all of it, which kind of gives me a lot more confidence that he clearly knows what he's doing. And he clearly knows how to adjust to each rule set and each style. So that's inspired me. I want to be a lot like that as well. I want to be able to fight all the disciplines because I love all of them, and I want to be able to win in all of them. If that's through like strategy, because maybe I'm not as good of a grappler as the next guy I'm fighting. Like when I fought Olivia, she's a brown belt. Obviously, I'm not as good at grappling as her, but just having the right strategy on the night is the reason why we won. Yeah. So I think that inspires me a lot. Yep. Yeah.
How about for you, Alex?
I study coaches. A lot. I study coaches in every discipline. It's pretty easy to follow the coaches that are kind of setting the trends for coaching. And there are a few, I like to study a lot of the older coaches as well, which you mostly read about. There's obviously not interviews and videos. So I've had a few key books which have been really cool insights into old coaches. Just understanding that coaching, the role of the coach has changed so much in even 100 years. That coaches did different things to what coaches do now. Coaches, it's so specific now where you have a dietitian, a strength and conditioning coach, a boxing coach, whatever it be. Where back in the day you had like your boxing coach, and he was so much more a life coach. And you see that different coaches, some coaches can manage stars and others can't. So part of managing talent is managing the personality and the relationship. You're managing the individual. They pick up the sport quite quickly, and a lot of what they do is natural. Like you teach them, but they're very intuitive with the sport. People that are actually like naturally gifted to it. So you have to keep them in the gym, keep them inspired, keep them working through hurdles, keep them challenged. So much of coaching is actually how you deal with an individual, because there's so many coaches that are so good technically and just don't have any athletes because they're just not personable. They can't read people. They're not relatable to their fighters. They can't spend the time in their fighter's personal life helping that person. And so there's so many good coaches I've seen, like I said, technically brilliant. I can mention heaps that have never gotten the kind of recognition that they expect because they feel like they know so much. They can do a 1 hour breakdown video of the most in-depth stuff about hand positioning and inside fighting, but they've never had a fighter. And you've never heard of them as a coach. They don't know how to manage people.
So out of curiosity then, how do you find these guys?
Which ones?
Like, so if there's a coach out there, and I don't know if you want to mention their name or not, but like if they're out there that are very technical at breaking things down.
Instagram. Yeah. So they put it on their socials. They're always talking about boxing study. They're putting out videos. They're working with pads, and I'm learning stuff from them technically all the time.
Are you a Barry Robinson fan?
He confuses me. He's mix of good and a bit of, like, I think he goes a bit too far with angles and stuff like that, to a point where, again, seems to know everything about boxing but can't produce quality. When he first came on the scene, everyone went to him. A lot of the MMA guys went to him. Like, I think I saw Jeremy Stevens and a few different dudes with him. And then his name kind of disappeared. So there's obviously a disconnect between him and people, where you get a guy like Justin Gaethje's coach, Trevor Whitman. The way he relates, motivates, activates, inspires his individuals on top of his technical knowledge is why he's so good. Do you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure the other guys, a lot of the dudes particularly who are like him, who don't have fighters but are making money from instructionals, are doing the technical side and not the athlete side.
It's a very interesting thing because like I'm very big on analyzing those sorts of aspects and the impact that people in the corner can have on the actual athlete. When it comes to game plan, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to motivation, like there's so many factors that go into it, and when you're in the fire, you sometimes, as a fighter, you just zone out, right? Like you just, I'm here. In terms of like, are there any fights for you, Jacinta, that you reflect back on and you go, geez, that was my toughest fight, and you felt like you grew the most from?
I think that if I have to grow like from any of the fights, it would be one, the MMA loss. The amateur loss I had overseas, because that kind of ignited a little passion for me in MMA. It made me really curious about what I could do if I actually learned how to grapple. So that one is very pivotal for me. And then I think that the Muay Thai loss as well is very pivotal because I was set on going down that path. not particularly enjoying it, but set on it. And then having what I felt like at the time was that taken away from me, put me onto the new path. So, I mean, they were both losses, but they both changed the trajectory of where I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So outside of the fighting stuff, like how do you then put it all together with like do you have people that look after you from trying to get your sponsorships and all that sort of stuff? Like who does all that for you guys at the moment?
We do it.
We do.
We do everything. Yeah. No, we have a management company we work with as far as getting the fight in Abu Dhabi. But as far as sponsorship, like a lot of my sponsors are going back from years before I was even pro. Before I was going to be fighting internationally, I was kind of a nobody. But they see how hard you try. A lot of them are like family friends or. One of my main ones is a guy that I was training kickboxing with when I first started in my first year.
Wow.
So it was nobody then, right?
Yep.
And he left and started his own business. He's got a carpentry business, Genesis Carpentry and Cleaning.
Hey.
So I've known him for 8 years, and he could see the work we're doing, and he wants us to succeed. So they've come on board.
Yep.
I think it's mostly just people. You don't realize sometimes who's watching you, and those people reach out after time and yeah, it's all through our own hard work. No one's getting it for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you ever feel? I guess you're in sales, but like for me, I always feel a bit. What's the word? Like I feel a bit self-conscious. If I don't really try and chase ads or sponsorships or something like that for the podcast. Because I always feel it's a bit facetious. I know most people shouldn't feel like that. But for me personally, I just feel like it's not really, in the spirit of why I started. I know some fighters, they do get a bit self-conscious about, hey, do you want to sponsor me? And
we do too. But we have a very real plan of repaying, not financially, but in terms of like ideas we're putting together to get back to them. We can't provide them enough awareness to really help their business.
Sure.
We promote it as much as we can, and if they get clients from it, that'd be awesome. But we know that that's not really why they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah,
they're not looking at it as marketing; they're looking at it as support. And if we do make it, bring them into that world that they watch from the outside and they're such big fans of, is what we want to give back to them. So we are very aware of that feeling of someone giving us money for potentially no return for their business when they work so hard for it. It's something we do not take lightly. We don't take any part of anyone that supports us very lightly. Even at the end of our camp, we either pay or give gifts to everyone who's come in and helped us.
Yep.
So we definitely feel the same when it comes to sponsors.
Yep. No, fair enough. All right. Well, let's just talk a little bit about your upcoming fight with Josefine. So any thoughts? I don't want you guys to give away the game plan, but, for you, any thoughts in terms of how you feel coming into this fight? I guess mental state, like how when it comes to nutrition and all that, like who looks after that for you and weight and all that sort of stuff? Like how you looking and feeling coming into this?
So we got the fight, I think we had 7 or 8 weeks notice. Actually, initially we had 3 weeks notice for the fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the date of the fight was supposed to be the 25th of January instead of February. And we got the offer, and I was, I was like, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I can drop this much weight. I can get ready, blah, blah, blah. And then we had, because I don't do too much MMA sparring outside of camp. We do more single discipline work.
Yep.
So we had a little MMA spar the next day to see where I'm at, and it was atrocious. It was horrible. Alex was terrified.
Yeah.
And plus, we just come off Christmas as well, so it was a little bit heavy. So the weight was going to be an issue. My dietitian said you're going to have to ask for a catch weight because it's not safe to get you down to 52 kilos in less than 3 weeks.
Yeah, wow.
But luckily enough, they moved the show.
Yep.
I imagine that all the fighters kicked up a bit of a stink about the weight and the traveling and the preparation.
Of course.
So they moved the show a month back, which was perfect. This camp, Alex kind of said to me in the beginning that he was going to push me harder than he had before. At the time, I was like, yeah, no worries. I'm here to work hard. But for that first 4 weeks, it was really, really tough. It broke me down a lot.
Yep.
I felt like I couldn't get anything right. Was going into every session, kind of a bit tired from the last session. Not winning any rounds. But now that we're 2 weeks out, the amount of work we've been doing has come down a bit.
Yep.
I've been fresher, I've been sharper, and I feel like I'm starting to peak now.
Yep.
And I feel like all the hard work we did, all the stuff we did to break me down, like physically and mentally as well, is starting to pay off just in the last week or so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from your perspective, Alex, like how are you feeling coming into this?
The first 4 weeks is always not the most confidence building, but it has its purpose. Created a sink or swim environment for her where I said, we will just crush you to the point where you'll either become the best fighter you've ever been or you'll flop and you'll just know it's not for you. You're not going to be at this level if you're not going to survive this. So they're your two paths.
Yep.
So when it got to the end of that duration of very difficult period, and now you've had a week of really fucking good period, you're starting to realize, okay, we're swimming. So this will just escalate. We'll peak come fight week, and if we've planned it right, like I said, she should be the best fighter she's ever been. I think before fights you always get excited to show off things you've improved, but I don't really care if we don't. I think you should be able to see as an outside, just from like a whole point of view, that she's a different and better fighter, but we're not there to show our this skill and show our fucking jiu-jitsu skills, and we're just there to win the fight.
Yeah.
Even if she uses the same skills she's used every fight, we're just there to win.
Yep.
So the development's there, but I still think the overall package will just look different to what they've been watching 6 months ago against Nyreen.
Yep. Okay. One of the other things that I think is also really important for people to think about is, when you're making the walk, I'm always curious about how people, what's going through your mind. Like, do you find that, would you describe yourself as nervous when you're in the white rooms, or are you a very calm person? Like can you talk me through the emotions that you go through when you're making the walk, and then up until, what is that emotion when the cage door closes and you're on?
So I like a very specific environment. I don't like anyone in that room that's not meant to be there.
Yep.
So the people that are meant to be there is Alex, Anthony, and Kung, my third corner man.
Yep.
I don't like anyone else there. Even when we fought on the Tim Zoo show, I had a photographer in the back room. It was making me so uncomfortable. But anyway, I like the environment, very chill with my group.
Yep.
Our last couple ones have been, real relaxed. We got the music going, having a bit of fun, we're running through the game plan. It's always the same kind of thing at first, where I think to myself, like, what am I doing here? Like, you've done this to yourself again. After you remember how scary it was last time, you've done it again.
Yep.
But then you kind of come to terms with yourself and you're like, well, you asked to be here.
Yeah.
Like, no one forced you to be here. You went around and hassled every single person you know
to
get you a fight. And now you're here. And, like, just the work we've done and the stakes for if we keep winning, like the trajectory that we're on now, the stakes are so high, and what we want is so close now. Like a couple wins, maybe one win.
Yep.
So that's all I'm thinking about in the back room. Is I just need to be brave and be strong for 15 minutes, or less than that maybe.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter, like, how scared you are. You just need to be brave for these, like, 15, 20 minutes. And then you get to be a legend for the rest of, until the next fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't cower away, and those moments are all that matters when doesn't matter how good you've been in camp, how many people you submitted or knocked out or whatever. If you go in there and being a coward for the next 15 minutes, it all means nothing.
So then, you're having that sort of pep talk in your own mind.
Yeah.
And then, you get the call up, you start making the walk. Like, what's going through your mind as you're walking out to the cage?
By this point, I want the fight to start.
Yep.
Because once we get into the fight, once there's a couple exchanges, and once the fight starts getting harder, is when I do the best and when I start to feel comfortable.
Yep.
So by this point, I'm just excited. I just want the fight to begin. That's pretty much it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then once the cage door closes and you're in there, and you basically, it's you, the other person, and the ref. Like, what do you fixate on? Like, you just fixated on the other person? You fixated on what you want to do? Like,
sometimes I am so fixated on what I want to do that I walk into a lot of stupid shit. Like last fight, I walked into this stupid right hand because I was so fixated on my setup. I wasn't watching her properly.
Yeah.
But by this point, I've also rehearsed how I'm going to start the fight so many times that I don't really need to think about how I'm going to start.
Yep.
I'm super alert after I've had almost 30 fights now. So I'm super alert to the voices, so I can hear absolutely everything that comes from my corner and usually her corner too.
Yep.
So a lot of
this time it'd be Swedish.
Yeah, it was Swedish.
Fuck they're saying.
They can speak English.
Like
they
in
should.
Japan, I don't know what the fuck they were saying.
Yeah. No, but I'm super alert to what's coming from my corner. They see stuff and point it out straight away.
Yep.
So I'm always just I'm waiting to hear from them, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then for you, Alex, you know, when Jacinta's making the walk and you know, she's getting in there, like what's going through your mind?
When we're in the waiting area to walk out, it's just complete fucking nerves and dread. As soon as her music drops, I'm good. I'm ready for war.
Yeah.
My mind just flicks and I just wanted to, like, it's all about win.
Yep.
It just goes from like just fucking complete, like everything could go wrong to like nothing's going to go wrong. We're going to destroy this person. Yeah. And the whole team just kind of G's up as soon as the song goes. We start the walk and everyone's just on a different level, on a different plane. We're in the zone at that point. I think, backstage, always thinking about the most stupidest, like irrelevant, unimportant things, and your mind's wandering in so many different directions, and you're just trying to organize your thinking, stay focused, keep on what we're doing. But then as soon as you make the walk, you just so hyper focus in, you just dial in, and I have no problem from that point, literally until the fight's done, until the hand's raised or whatever, and then the whole world kind of just comes back for a second.
Yep. Yeah, it's important, you know, like when you have like these big moments, it's like you can't shy away from it. You know, you just got to enjoy it, bask in it, you know, because, you're on the cusp. But who cares whether you're on the cusp or not? You still just got to enjoy like the ride while you're on it, because you don't know what can happen, right? Like it's just one of those things that...
On a point of this, because I felt like this is a funny thing, especially in our camp, is I don't need to be smiling and laughing to be enjoying something. I can enjoy chaos and violence, and I can enjoy getting punched in the face and punching someone in the face. And we're still enjoying the experience when we're not smiling. We've had this problem in the corner, explaining to people like I'm not going to smile before I go out. It's just not me. But trust me, I'm loving every bit of being there. That's why, you know what I mean? I'm obsessed with this thing I do. But it doesn't mean you have to smile and laugh. I feel like when people manufacture that backstage to try lighten the mood and act like they're enjoying it, they start to separate a bit from their intention, and it puts them in kind of two minds. I think you can enjoy it any way you want to enjoy it. If you're not dreading it and you're looking forward to it, smiling or not, you're going to enjoy it when the shit kicks off. And I think it comes down to what you fight for. If you enjoy the chaos and the violence, when that kicks off, that's my enjoyment. Like as soon as I get punched, I get that sense of fuck, this is now I remember why I do this. Yeah. So you can enjoy it in your very own way. You don't have to be comical backstage and be a comedian, and you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. Well, we've got Olivia waiting, so let's wrap this up. So, you know, for people that want to watch it, there's going to be a live stream, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it'll be on Fight Pass.
Oh, it's on Fight Pass. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about 6 a.m. our time, Sydney time.
Okay.
Sunday morning is my guess, the 26th of Feb. My guess will be around there. We'll post on our socials the time we expect the fight to be. Yep.
Okay. And if people want to find you guys, so your handle is?
It is now Jacinta.Austin_.
Okay. And Alex?
We're Carioti MMA _Hornsby.
Yep. There we go. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.